Hello friends, I'm Artifexus, you can call me Artie, and today we've got ourselves a mini I'm very pleased with. Horrific in all the right ways, and what ended up a collision of universes that fit like a perfect leather glove. And the best part, it was much simpler to create than I, certainly, as a fairly new and inexperienced painter, would have expected. So, let us beat about the space bush no longer. Let's dive right in. So we begin at the Kitbash Korner livestream, as these things often do. We were poodling through the available units when Sinoculus dropped this suggestion. And with that, an image built in my mind. All those gooey, icky tendrils. I had no idea how I'd do it, but I knew I'd absolutely give it a go. And I knew that a bloodletter would be an ideal base model to work off of. Then, one Francois Marion refined the suggestion further. There it was, a Venom symbiote-style entity devouring another mini. I also couldn't help but think of The Thing, mainly from John Carpenter's The Thing. For real, one of my favourite movies of all time. So yes, with these two elements in mind, the mini wouldn't so much be Venom in his whole solid form, but Venom when he's all gooey. But this presented interesting challenges. The biggest one being that obviously green stuff would have to get involved, but it wouldn't simply be creating new things to stick on or adding layers, although that would come later. It needed to effectively create a bridge between two separate minis. It'd be difficult to do that without making a mess of things with just green stuff alone. So, I had to build a frame between the two minis, a skeleton for the gooey mass, if you would. Oh, and quick sidetrack before we continue, when I made the cultist fella, I glued him down by his back foot rather than his front foot to make him look like he's recoiling backwards rather than running forwards, huh? Anyways, there are many ways one could make this black mass frame. Wire is a popular choice, but I thought since we're effectively making a straight line connection here, I'd just use a length of sprue, and honestly, it looked pretty hopeful from the start. And as you can see, I also decided to have the Venom thing's head extending off of the body, just to add to the thing side of things. So I just bent a sprue for that. It worked really well. And with that done and glued into place, it's green stuff time, a Kitbasher's friend. I layered it over not just the sprue bridges, but over the main Venom body, and also wrapped it around the cultist like he's being consumed. I also eventually added a giant tyrannid scythe claw, just for some added menace. Oh, and if anyone's wondering, I deliberately made the face look like it's coming out of the neck stalk, rather than naturally a part of it. This is the Thing inspiration coming out, but of course, if you want to try this mini or something thereabouts, you can do it however you wish. Real quick guys, I want to give an extra special shout out to my Patreon lieutenants for their awesome support. Thank you so kindly. As well as of course my battle brothers and sergeants and all that jazz on YouTube memberships and Patreon. And of course if you're enjoying this, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and consider joining the Discord. Awesome stuff happens there. Anyways, where were we? Ah yes, horrifying grossness. I kept adding layers of green stuff, bulking him out where needed, and adding liquid green stuff when I wanted to smooth out any clear edges. And with that done, next came the master stroke in the plan, sprue goo. But not just any sprue goo. I made this sprue goo like maybe a year ago now, and it went horribly wrong. You see, to make homemade sprue goo, you take plastic cement and add some sprue to it and let it melt until you end up with a goo that will set shortly after applying. Handy for filling gaps or customizing details. But see, I added way too much sprue to my goo, so now I have a pot of goo that's so thick it begins to solidify as soon as it leaves the bottle, resulting in stringy, tendril-like masses. See the plan here? I would take this goo and effectively drape, wrap, and coat the mini in it, and it made for awesome gooey tendrils, just what the hobbyist ordered. Now, I deliberately added loads of the stuff. Too much, in fact. I did this because I knew most would get knocked off or otherwise removed from the mini just by me building and painting it. So, my hope was that there'd be enough survivors by the end. Oh, it was also at this point that To the Max suggested adding bits to the body, like bones, teeth, faces, etc., to really sell the idea that he's consumed things many times in the past, and indeed, it really looked good by the time I'd added them all. And with that, building was complete. With the cultist's horror and those nasty tendrils, he's already looking horrific, but of course, we need him to look like Venom. After browsing through pictures of Venom, both in comic and live action form, I knew I needed to make him look oily and slick with a viscous layer on his body. Now, I had a plan for that, but first I had to paint him, starting with black primer, though try as I might, I couldn't quite cover him perfectly. You can see some of the green stuff shining through. Too many crevices on the guy. Ugh. So first I went over him roughly with Abaddon Black, just to make him, well, all black. Not quite a full prime, but frankly, it's fine. I decided to do up the cultist himself in full before focusing on Venom himself. Not the easiest thing, given that he's wrapped up in, well, stuff. And I won't go through all the paints I used for him, but I did him up vaguely as a good old Black Legion cultist. With that guy done, and the plethora of spills repainted black, it was time to add the iconic details, starting with Venom's eyes, which I did with Korax White, followed by some white scar just to give it a little depth. As you can see, I usually like to make things too big, then tailor them back in from the outside. Then I did the tongue with Corn Red, then the teeth with Wraithbone before hitting them up with Rakarth Flesh. Then came the highlights, which was thankfully simple. He's a writhing mass of darkness after all, so he absorbs most light, but a little was needed. So I gave him a very light brushing of Eshin Grey along his top side and some more harsh edges before doing so again, but much lighter with a 50-50 mix of Eshin Grey and Dawnstone. I shaded and highlighted the tongue with Karaberg Crimson, Wazdaka Red, and Wild Rider Red, respectively, before basing the piece. I went for a desert rock look just to contrast the darkness of the Venomness. So at this point, the painting was pretty much done. I could have called it a day and been very pleased with it, but remember that glossy, oily look that we want for the skin? It's time to implement it. And to achieve it, I used varnish. Specifically, Valijo's matte varnish. Now, I know what you're thinking, a glossy look, but with a matte varnish? Where? Well, hear me out. A while ago, I tried varnish for the first time on a Techmarine. I expected it to be matte, but it was still quite glossy. While a disappointment at the time, that look is exactly what I'm after now. So, with an expendable brush, I lathered it on, trying to smooth out any bubbles that appeared, but not being overly worried about them. In the end, Venom is an organic mass, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Plus, it would naturally fill in any gaps and crevices I missed. Once it dried and thus turned clear, the results speak for themselves. He looks positively oily. The only thing I did now was go over the eyes again. I wanted them to have a different texture from the rest of him. And with that, he's now complete. And looking, gross and vile and mighty fine. And thankfully, my gambit with all the sprue goo tendrils paid off. Many were gone, but the strongest remained. I tried a whole lot of new things doing this piece, and I learned a lot too, which I'm excited to carry forward as I try more new things. It gives me real hope about the things I could do in the future, given that I'm still relatively inexperienced and pretty new to the hobby, and then I managed to create something that I would have thought only an expert could make, to be utterly honest. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, but I'm still super pleased with it. And also, it involves two minis interacting with each other, like a kind of scene. Is this technically a diorama? Is this technically my first ever diorama? Or do dioramas need more than that? Do they need like backdrops and all that stuff? Let me know, you diorama experts out there. So yes, thank you everyone involved in the creation of this piece. And remember, if you want to get involved, tune in to the next Kitbash Korner and we'll see what kind of horrors we can make together. It's all part of the fun of creating. Right, well, I'm Artifexus, and remember, the Emperor is always guiding your brush.